are back. You're listening to You Would Think, the Philadelphia Flyers podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Collington, and back again, Kevin Durso. How are you, bud?
Doing well. How are you?
I'm doing good. We had last week off. I was at home for a wedding. Shout out Garrett and Jess. Congratulations. And now we're back. We have some hockey to talk about. It's been a couple of weeks. It's good.
We're starting a lot of hockey to talk about in the last 2 weeks. They played a lot of games.
and we're starting to kind of get into the flow of the season. And before we get into the flow of the show, follow us on Twitter, everywhere, social media, at YWT Podcast. Follow Kevin at Kevin_Durso. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Help us out over there. All right, getting right into it. As we sit here today, according to the NHL, the Flyers are 500. Now they're below 500 when you include the fact that they've won 7 games and lost 8 games. But according to the NHL, 500, 7-1 through 15 here.
At least it's a very close to 500. We're not talking about like
they're not a disaster.
Well, we're not talking about 5-7-3, and we're counting those extra, like, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like, and I know that doesn't make it 500. We're not talking, or like
they're not 5-5-5.
Right, or 6-6-3, even, where it's like, come on, they've won 6, lost 9. No, they've won 7, lost 8, and I think that what you look at too is you're trying to look at. We've talked about this already with the first handful of games that we got to in the last several shows. You're looking for competitiveness within games for the most part, and they've had they've had a few that by the final score were not very competitive in the last handful of games.
Certainly,
but they had, like, let's put it this way, we were just raving prior about, look what they did against Dallas. Look what they did against Vegas. They carried, leads or tie games or whatever it was into the later stages of a game. And they did that with Carolina at the very start of this whole stretch since our last show. Right. Same thing. A game that was tied late, under 4 minutes to go. They give up what was the game winner. And but at least, and that's like the perfect rebuild game. That you're in it, but you don't win it, and you don't get points for it, so you don't get anything to show for it. But
nobody's
well.
bummed about it, right?
Right, but you played well, and you did some good things, and certainly, there's also an element to Carolina kind of got off to a little bit of a slow start. Like, they've kind of found their footing lately, but at that particular time, which was almost 2 weeks ago,
Carolina was really, really struggling.
They were struggling. And that could be the amount of, well, they didn't have Svechnikov at the time, and he's back now, but they also had some new faces. I mean, Orlov's new to the D-core, and
they were getting some inconsistent goaltending. They were just kind of struggling throughout.
That was also before the Freddie Anderson news came out too, about he's out indefinitely with the a blood clot they found, right? So,
something like that, yeah. And we obviously wish him a speedy recovery, because that's always scary.
I think it's the same. It sounds like the same thing that Kimmo Timonen went through.
Okay.
You remember when he was kind of supposed to play, and then all of a sudden it was, well, he can't. They found blood clots, and it's
crazy.
Dangerous. He's got to go through some stuff. So,
and then the Blackhawks traded for him anyway, and he still won the cup. Crazy.
They traded for him right as he was about to retire.
I know.
They waited it out, but
but he hadn't played a game. It's still risky out of them.
Oh, I know, that's true,
But yeah, it is nice to see Carolina kind of right the ship a little bit, because we do look at them as one of those teams that we expect to be a cup contender out of the Metro. So even though they are a division rival at this point in time where the Flyers are at, it's good to see a good team turn it around, right?
Right, and well, yeah, sure, and
keep him out of the basement.
I know. Well, and I guess that was the thing too, because after they played Carolina, they kind of lost a hard luck game against Buffalo, where I believe that the shot total at the end of the game was 40-15, and they lost the game 5-2.
Yeah, the score says 5-2. It's not a 5-2 game. Let's be real.
They were the better team that night by far.
Absolutely. It's a 2-2 game until the third period. It's a 3-2 game until 7.5 minutes left. You were in the game all the way. You were out shooting. Score effects were fully in effect.
They got goalied big time that night.
They got goalied.
Was outstanding in that game. And then the funny part is he was back in goal 2 nights later, and then they got him for 5. And they didn't play they still were the better team than Buffalo that night, but didn't play near as well as they did in that first game.
Who did play well in that game though?
Well,
first career goal, Louis Belpedio. Let's go.
Since then, he's added another one too. And
listen, he has established himself in this lineup. I'm just saying.
for right now,
he's earning a roster
has,
spot.
Yeah, like, well, here's, you know what he's done? You're seeing why he was the guy that everybody told them to go with, right? Like,
yes,
I know that the immediate crutch is to sit there and go, well, Torts wants that guy because, you know, he's not going to play Emil Andre. He's not going to play Addard or Ginning or whatever, right? Like, he's not going to play one of those guys, right? And the reality is that Torts just goes with what Briere and Ian LaPerriere are going to go with because they're watching those games too. Like, Briere's going from one to the other frequently, you know, to go see them for himself.
Yeah.
And Lappy's obviously going to give his input on guys and things like that. And that's who they picked. And I kind of was skeptical of it at the beginning because the fact that my thought is, okay, I understand how you might come away with those other guys aren't ready yet. But isn't that also what you're kind of trying to figure out this season too? Is like, yeah, maybe they're not ready, but we're throwing them into the fire anyway because they've got to learn sometime. And instead of doing and okay, Andre got thrown into the fire at the very beginning of the year because he played, but he clearly looked overwhelmed, and you send him down. So do you not try? Yep. But so do you not try a guy like Addard and say, well, let's see how you do and see if you're ready, and if it doesn't work after 6 games, we send you down and Ginning comes up or what? You know what I mean? Like you could do a constant rotation. They just went with the guy who seemed like he was having the better year, and he's actually played well enough that he hasn't deserved to come out of the lineup. Like,
absolutely,
like I don't love that they pulled Igor Zamula in the game against LA, but he had made some mistakes, and yes, it was a back-to-back, and maybe you take a guy who doesn't play who hadn't played as frequently and say, take a seat for a night, and Victor Mete, it's your turn. You know,
right? Get him, and you get an excuse to get him into a game as well.
Well, and what I am concerned about is, I hope it's a one game, it's a one-off, and Zamula is back for Wednesday. I'd keep Belpedio, obviously, and then they should come back out to finish the road trip. Like,
absolutely,
don't get so attached to Victor Mete in the lineup because you want a game 4-2 in LA. That,
but I did want to say regarding the other guys that we've talked on this show a lot about the players on the team are playing to win, and it is management's responsibility to put together a roster that isn't capable of winning, and that is kind of the tug of war nature of the rebuild.
Right.
I don't mind Danny Briere keeping your Emil Andre, your Adam Ginning, those guys in Lehigh Valley, because I think they make your NHL team better, which is not necessarily what you want right now. And I don't mind, and I also don't mind them playing top 2, top 4 minutes in Lehigh Valley as opposed to third pair in the NHL. We've talked about that too, and just ice time is a factor as well.
Sure, and that is a factor. I will go back to Belpedio for a second because, again, I have to acknowledge how well he's played overall. He's got a couple of goals now, but can we talk about the hip check in Saturday's game?
Pretty.
Like, the vintage nature of that play and just his, again.
Radko Gudas just shed a happy little tear somewhere. We love a good hip check.
I got a comment on the platform formerly known as Twitter. Somebody said that looked like Rob Blake going out there doing that.
Okay.
And I got to agree with that.
That's higher praise than Radko Gudas.
I got to agree. It's vintage. You don't see people do that often, and he timed it perfectly. So, like, how many times do you see somebody try to do that and they call it a penalty because it's late?
There is an art to it. You gotta. You can be late. You can be low. Like, there's a lot of ways you can screw that hit up.
Call it tripping. If you're late, it's interference. Yes.
There's a lot of ways to screw that up, and hitting someone clean like that is an art form. It really is. But either way, it's been nice to see out of Belpedio. Is he an all-star? No. And I understand that. But is he a fun guy that we're going to look back on in 3 or 4 years and go, hey, remember Louis Belpedio? And it's going to be fun, right? Like, there's always those guys, and when you're getting through a rebuild, you need bodies. And even if he ends up kind of just being a body, it's fun while it lasts.
Louis Belpedio is going to be a really good Puckdoku answer.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yes, you're probably right. 5 years from now, it's going to be like, hey, by the way, remember when that guy played? Like, you're right. Like, he's still part. Like, there's like, I don't see him being part of this 5 years from now because 5 years.
Maybe as a phantom, you never know.
Well, 5 years from now, you hope that there's something
enough defensemen in the organization that he just isn't anywhere close to playing. Yeah.
Well, because you have to evolve at some point.
Sure.
And to go off of just kind of keep continuing with where their record is and where the play has been, things like that, like what you're trying to do right now, and again, like it's results based upon trying to figure out who's going to stick, and trying to figure out like everything it should revolve around the other goals that you have for the team moving forward. And truthfully, think about something for a second, because we just said it, they're 7-1 on the season already, and it's 15 games in, and that's where they're at, right? They could screw around and win 35 games this season with
it's supremely not impossible. Absolutely. And looking at the league, if we look towards the bottom of the standings, just very briefly, and we're not going to go crazy into this right now. I'm going to talk about.
It would have been funny. It would have been funnier 2 games ago.
That is fair, but no, I'm going to talk about teams with 4 wins or less at this point, because I think if you have 4 wins or less, you're probably not looking at making the playoffs. Right now, Columbus, Calgary, Edmonton, San Jose.
Okay.
San Jose might be the worst team in the salary cap era. Legitimately.
Which is funny because they
shocking.
Already.
Sure. And then they also turned around a couple days later and beat Edmonton, who is the next team here. Edmonton fired Jay Woodcroft on Sunday morning. Chris Knobloch is the new head coach. Paul Coffey on the bench.
An assistant went with them, so
that is fully a kick in the ass with a little side of, hey Connor, look who we hired. Please stay in Edmonton.
You're getting to that point, yes.
Oh, absolutely. And you have to be. He's got 2 years left on his deal. Well, it's time to start sucking up to Connor real good, because the second he says I want out, your franchise goes through some stuff.
Well, he's also got the ability to play the best player in the world card, which is true, and
correct.
And you can just throw the bag at him,
Oh, and they will. But I don't know. But I don't think the bag is going to be enough. Connor McDavid is going to be
that's the case.
I think Connor McDavid is going to be an unrestricted free agent.
You think his goal is just go and,
win.
We'll go somewhere where it will
win.
Work.
I think everyone is going to offer him 13, 14, 15 million, whatever the number is. It's going to be stupid. But 32 teams are going to call him and offer it to him. And if they're not, they should. And if your team doesn't call and offer Connor McDavid $15 million a year, you fire him. Period.
Okay.
It's the best player in 20 years. And he's hitting the free market at 27 or whatever at 28. Like, insane.
Well, and
every team is going to throw the bag at him. He gets to come out and have the ESPN special and say he's taken his talents to Toronto or to Detroit or.
What if it did turn out to be Toronto?
Detroit.
You think he'd go to Detroit? Well, I mean, you're close to where he's
he's a Toronto boy. So he grew up across the lake. He played his junior in Erie.
Yeah.
Doesn't have to pay Canadian taxes.
True. And
look at that team. You're telling me Steve Yzerman's not going to set that team up to throw a big fat offer at Connor McDavid? Do you want to put Alex DeBrincat on his wing?
Oh, then DeBrincat played junior with him.
Hello. We spent 2 years talking about the Johnny Gaudreau tampering committee. They got to put together the McDavid tampering committee immediately.
And
sign every Erie Otter who is anywhere near the NHL.
Well, either way, because you're right about this. If you're pointing out the teams that have 4 wins or less, by the way, this is the move that Edmonton's going to make to get out of that group.
This is their kick in the pants.
All time, and it's through 13 games because
it's the right time to do it.
Well, they
gotta go.
Well, the ironic part of it is that they won on Saturday, so they actually did this after a win.
Yeah, they had
They were 2-9-1 before then, obviously.
Right.
It's like if you're 2-9-1 and your most recent loss was San Jose, and by the way. They even said you could see them walking off of the bench, the coaching staff, walking off the bench.
Oh, they know.
San Jose game going, I think it's over.
Oh, yeah. We'll see you, boys.
Well, and it was, so it was very predictable. Maybe the timing was a little unpredictable because they didn't do it immediately in that spot. And then they did by the way, assured everybody for the day after and the day following, they're leading up to their next game. Oh, it wasn't going to happen today or tomorrow.
Right.
So it happened 3 days after that game. it doesn't change the fact that it was on the writing was on the wall. But now because this has happened, and it should be we've seen this happen with so many.
Craig Berube and the Blues.
Wake up calls happen all the time when coaching changes are made.
Well, and it turns out when you have the two of the best 5 players in the world,
Sure.
I don't think they needed a wake up call, but you just gave them one. Connor McDavid's going to be a menace.
Sure. Well, and also in the case of the team that they are, which take away the fact that they yes, I know they got McDavid and Draisaitl and all that. I get it.
They're bad.
But on top of that, this is a team that, just relatively speaking, and I have my thoughts on their goaltending. I have my thoughts on their defense. It's not very good. I know. Which, by the way, is
the Darnell Nurse contract is atrocious. Oh my God!
Look, I like Darnell Nurse as a player.
Me too.
I think
at
he's
6.
Well, exactly.
Maybe 7.
You know what contract you give Darnell Nurse?
Okay.
You give him the Travis Sanheim contract.
Okay.
8 years and at 6.25.
Yep.
You walk away happy because you know what you're getting from that guy for the next however many years.
Almost a decade. Yep.
Right. And but going to the 9.5, which puts you into, and it's the first name that pops into my head when this comes up, because I'm not taking one of the superstars here.
Right.
I'm going to somebody who kind of is a little bit over his role for where he plays.
Yeah.
You gave him the Seth Jones contract.
Yeah, you did. You absolutely did. That is the comparable, and they're both terrible contracts.
You matched up comps, and listen, can you blame Nurse for doing it? No.
Oh no.
Did you see what Chicago did?
Darnell, congratulations, sir. Get that bag. But
my point is that even with all those things aside, now comes the wake up call, and this team was knocking on the door for conference. Well, wasn't a conference final 2 years ago, and knocked on the door last year. The goal is make the playoffs and make a bit of a run, because you got 2 of the top 5 players in the league. You got the best player in the world, and you got a second one who's in the top 5.
If the Oilers don't make the playoffs this year, I think there's a real chance that McDavid wants out.
I wouldn't be shocked. I mean, what did you see? You also saw after they lost to the Sharks, you saw the interview that Draisaitl gave.
Yep.
Can you tell the frustration level is up?
It's even down to a Vander Kane. You saw him talk about the fight. He's like, well, I'm not playing well, so I just figured I'd spend 7 or 8 minutes in the box. What?
Because that's the way they think.
That team's given up. If your players are thinking like that, you have given up.
Yeah.
What are we doing? Man, they have to make a change. And I don't think firing Jay Woodcroft was the correct decision. I think he is an excellent coach.
Well, because
I don't know what else you do though. Jack Campbell can't stop a beach ball.
Well, but that's an indictment on, this is where I was getting at. You can look, teams do it all the time. You can put the blame on the coach all you want to.
Ken Holland's got to go.
It's an indictment of Ken Holland. Exactly. You didn't, your biggest weakness was clear to anybody with a pair of eyes.
Yep.
Who watched your team and goes, your goaltending's a problem area.
Right. And you could probably use another defenseman as well. Right.
Right. I mean, the thing with the defense is that Nurse is good. He's not the contract level good, but he's good. And Bouchard was on the up and up. He was rising. We were talking about him in the playoffs a lot last year.
Oh yeah, Evan Bouchard's a stud.
So he was rising, and you're sitting there going, all right, they're coming along defensively a little bit. They've got 2 fixtures at this point. Realistically speaking, if Nurse is your fixture on the second pair and Bouchard's a top pair, let's just say, right? Then you're in a position where you've got a couple of guys that you can build. And your third pairing's your third pairing, by the way. You know what I mean? It doesn't have to be flashy.
You know who makes sense, right?
What, for their D or for their goaltending?
For their goaltending.
You gonna tell me Carter Hart?
I sure am. He's from Eastern Edmonton.
I know.
He's got 2 years left, making $4 million. You can trade him straight up for Campbell, and obviously you will need more compensation. But contract for contract, you can take Campbell. You can get whatever assets you want, basically. They need to make it work. They need to make Connor McDavid happy. They gotta go, dude. They gotta go. And Carter Hart helps a lot. You go Carter Hart, Stuart Skinner as your tandem of the future. The way the NHL is going, where you're playing 2 goalies, you see Swayman and Ullmark in Boston. You see DeSmith and Demko in Vancouver. Why not Hart and Stuart Skinner?
I mean, I don't know. I hear you. There's like a lot to kind of consider with that.
Because Campbell signed a 1-year deal, right? Like that deal doesn't have any term on it, does it?
I mean, I don't know off the top of my head.
Okay, I'm looking it up.
I wasn't paying that close attention to like.
I'm pretty sure that was a 1-year deal. Oh no, I'm sorry, I am wrong. That was a 4-year deal. Never mind. I retract my statement. I do not think. Like I think there's still a framework there that makes sense where Jack Campbell comes the other way and is the Flyers goalie through the rebuild. Like I don't think that's crazy.
I guess, but
or at least one of the guys in the mix.
Like I guess, but like at the same time, I'm not trying to get. Like I don't know that you can go with like you already did that with one goaltender that's in the system right now.
That's fair.
That's what you did with the Cal Peterson decision.
Yeah, but it's not the end of the world. Cal Peterson, what's there 2 years left on Peterson this year and next?
Yes, correct.
Okay, it's a little bit different, but if you have 4 guys in your system and it's Ersson, Sandstrom, Peterson, Campbell, I'm fine with that. Honestly, you put one of them in the NHL, one of them in the AHL. For the old guys and the new guys, you figure it out. You make it work. Nobody's taking the contract, so you can put them in the minors, right? Like we saw Peterson pass their waivers easily. We saw Campbell pass their waivers this week, so you can put them in the AHL.
I know. I just don't love the idea of doing it constantly. And the other part of the equation is that you're trying to figure out whether or not Carter Hart's part of this or not. Because you don't know what the timeline's going to look like.
That's fair.
Every other night, or I shouldn't even say every other night, because let's be real, it's not every other night, but every time Boston College plays a game, I end up seeing another Cutter Gauthier clip. And every time the London Knights play, I see clips of Denver Barkey and Oliver Bonk. And every time Matvei Mishkov plays for Sochi, I see a clip. You know what I mean? Like,
that's true.
You're trying to build within that timeline, and the obvious cloud over Carter Hart aside for a moment.
Of course.
You're trying to figure out whether or not he's within that window, because up until a certain, believe it or not, the 2 biggest things with Carter Hart, and I'm bringing this up now, I guess, because we're already on him, is he's missed a little bit of time right now.
Yes.
Which should not be a surprise because he's had injury struggles in the past.
Yep.
But also, you tell me what's supposed to happen when for your first 10 games, he plays 8 of them. Like, in short order. Like, you can't just run the guy into the ground from day one. Most goalies don't do this anymore.
Especially when your roster's carrying 3 goalies. Like it's not like he's listen, if Carter Hart was your only decent goalie and you had a Mike McKenna behind him, no offense to Mike McKenna, but I'm just picking a name here. If you have just a name behind him, then okay, I can see Carter Hart. Your team is starting well. I can see him playing 7 or 8 of these games. You're out to a decent start.
Right.
John, you got 3 goalies on the roster.
Well, this was the complaint I had when Ersson finally got a start against Anaheim.
And the other 2 are the 2 young kids you're supposed to be taking a look at.
Well, this is the problem I had when Ersson got a start against Anaheim. This was right before our last show, so this was not the one that they just played this weekend. Even though Ersson played, we know that. But he got a start there, and
he wasn't supposed to.
Well, everybody this weekend wasn't supposed to start their games. That's different. But he was supposed to start the other game against Anaheim. It was a 1:00 game on a Saturday afternoon. He got the start that day.
Right.
When it started to get out of hand, they're down 4-0 in the game. Now, you're not going to change goalies because Carter Hart's sitting on the bench, and you want him for the next. You just played him on. Well, no, they didn't play him just that Friday. They didn't have a back-to-back, but you just played him for the 2 games leading up to during the week, and you want him for Carolina. So you're not going to change goalies. But the first time that Ersson played, Felix Sandstrom sat on the bench as the backup. So now
makes sense.
So now you don't do that. So now he can't go into a game. And oh, by the way, guess what happened there? And this is another kind of whole thing with the situation. They send him down for a conditioning stint because he hasn't played. Yep. And he literally played 2 games, and in the second game, he got hurt.
Well, that's why the conditioning stint's there.
Well, now he's got to go back for one probably whenever the injury's up, just so he can try to play again. And that's a disaster in and of itself. But, like, just balance it out better. Like, what do you think's going to happen? Like, seriously, well, especially when you consider, like, I understand you consider him your number 1. I understand that you consider him a key part of the future if, you're trying to build.
Right, he's 25 years old. Like, even if it takes you 3 years to turn around, he's 28 and still has theoretically most of a decade left.
Right.
Like,
I understand all of those factors. What I am trying to get at, though, is that, like, you can't play him like Andrei Vasilevsky.
No.
And yet you tried to, because so far what you basically did in the first 10 games, and I know that that's only a sample of the season, but in the first 10 games, he had 80% of the starts.
You're right.
What does that equate to over 82?
That's a lot of starts.
Over 82, it's going to be like 65 starts.
Yep, too many.
Well, that's not going to work for him. You need to balance them out.
Especially while your team is bad. Again, like, you're not pushing for a cup this year.
For their goaltending, as far as I'm concerned, their balance for the goaltending needs to be like 50-32.
Absolutely.
And that's still more like that still makes him a clear-cut number one. You're not doing the goalie tandem like Boston does.
Even with 3 goalies, I wouldn't hate seeing 40, 21, 21 type of thing. But
the 3 goalie thing is going to clear itself up once some of the contracts go away.
That's fair.
The kind of irrational fear that they have right now. Like, here's the thing now. Don't you think that now you could send Felix Sandstrom down just straight up and he'd clear?
Yeah.
I know he doesn't make a lot of money, but he's just been hurt.
Yeah.
Like, don't you think now that it's getting to that point, like, the irrational fear, like, yes, it wasn't really, I agree, it wasn't completely irrational at the start of the season when everybody's kind of looking for that quick, cheap option.
Especially Tampa. Yeah.
Yeah. And you're trying to figure that out, and he makes less than $1 million, and he can play.
Yep.
Like literally when I say that, what I mean is, like, I'm not even saying that he has to be great. It's just he can get in there and play some games for you and pass as a starter.
Right, and that's all you need out of an NHL caliber backup. Right.
That's all you're looking for. You're now at the point where it's kind of become this irrational fear of losing him because you haven't played him. He hasn't seen it. He hasn't seen the ice in an NHL game yet, and the season's almost a quarter of the way through.
Yeah.
So he hasn't seen the ice yet at the NHL level whatsoever. You don't seem interested in playing him, and what are we doing here? You know what I mean? Like, it finally gets to the point where it's like, well, what are we doing here? Because I got to imagine that the player at some point in time is going to go, well, if I'm not playing games, I got to figure out where else I'm going to go.
Yep.
And you're getting to that point. And guess what's going to be just as bad as putting him on waivers and losing him for nothing, or trying to work out a small trade. Just letting him walk away from whatever contract he's got.
Yep.
It's equally as bad. So
yeah, and that's the kind of thing that when you're a rebuilding team, you can't afford to let assets go for nothing.
And that's what I'm saying is you better figure out a way to make it work, and by make it work, I mean, like, figure out a solution to the thing, because at least with Cal Peterson, I get where that situation is, and I will understand
that was done out of necessity, right?
But I will also understand if you can't trade him because the contract is the contract. You didn't sign it; you took it on to get something else that you wanted, which was a first-round pick. And let's put it this way. No one's going to complain about that trade with that first-round pick if Oliver Bonk is in the NHL in a few years.
Absolutely not.
And playing decent, playing well enough. No one's going to complain about that.
I expect Oliver Bonk to be on the Matvei Michkov team. Like, by the time he gets over here, I expect Bonk to be
if you've got a
ready or just about ready.
If you've got a 3-year timeline, you're getting close to that, yes. And because at the very minimum, what that would be is 2 years of juniors, including this season that he's playing now. So 2 years of juniors, 1 year in the AHL. Welcome to the NHL, kid.
By the way, something I wanted to say, we're talking a little.
No, by the way, with him at that point, he'd be 22 years old. That's not
okay. Bad. Right, exactly.
If he makes his NHL debut in the 22-23 window, you're doing well.
Yeah. Something else I wanted to say. That we've been talking a little bit about kind of the bridge, right? The bridge to the end of the rebuild and what that's going to look like and what that roster is going to look like. And I've said some pretty harsh things on this show about what players kind of deserve to make it to the end of that bridge. One player through 15 games here has, in my opinion, cemented his place on that team. And that is Joel Farabee.
Oh, he's looked great.
He is a guy that we have talked about potentially trading because he was starting to underwhelm a little bit, and you can still get a good return for him, and change of scenery. We started throwing around all these crazy terms, and myself included, and I don't think I had him on kind of my untouchable list when we broke it down over the season or over the off season. He's back on the list.
Yeah, well,
I see him with a letter. I see him on that team. I want Joel Farabee to be a Flyer. I'm back on Joel Farabee as a Flyer forever. That would be great. Thank you.
Last year, I kind of was a defender to your points, And the big reason I was is because, like, listen, I was prepared to join you on that front if this season went like last season. Because once he got the offseason to actually train, get stronger, get healthy, the whole deal, if it still was what it was, then it's not good enough, and he's probably not part of the thing. But I wanted to see if he had the ability to get back to the
pre-injury Joel Farabee.
And that the scary part is, and I've seen people say this, you know, I think Charlie O'Connor said this on the platform formerly known as Twitter. Man, that's a mouthful. It was way easier to just say Twitter, wasn't
That's fair, yeah.
But he said this the other day, where it's like it might be better than pre-injury. Like,
it should. I mean, and it should be, right? Like, look at his age and where his development curve should be.
The criticism is that if he can even hit that for the surgery that he had, then it's like, well, that's still really
solid,
good.
Right?
Sure, he's not a top line player, but
you look at it,
really good to have in your middle six,
right?
He turned it around to be. I still think I still think his ceiling is probably second line, but second line leadership role.
Good second liner, yeah.
You know, and the good news is his scoring rate. You know, he's got 6 goals already, so his scoring rate is kind of on par with that 25 goal range. Which again, if that's what he tops out at, then that's what he tops out, and that's okay though. Like that's
sure.
In that range, like he was on pace for, based on the season that they played, the shortened season. He was on pace for 30. They played basically 2/3 of a season. He got to 20. He was on pace for 30. He seems to be on that kind of pace again because we're not even a quarter of the way through the season. He's at 6 goals. If over the next 5 games he can get another 2 or 3, you're in that range of 25 to 30 again. You know.
Yep.
You know, and realistically, he gets 1 or 2 more. He's on pace. You know, 1 more in the next 5 games, and he's on pace for 28.
Whew.
28 to 30.
Pretty good.
You know, that's where you want to be. You know, that's the kind of player. And I think what's better about him is, like, yes, he's scoring a few goals. That's great. You know, we'd seen him score goals too.
But he looks more confident.
Right. His playmaking is kind of returned to the level that you want to see it at as well.
He's more comfortable with the puck. He's comfortable being physical. He has found some great chemistry with Bobby Brink when they've been playing together.
The second point that you just made is the most important one, by the way, because last year he was afraid to be physical and afraid to do the dirty work, and he's got back to that.
Right, and he's not enormous, but he's got some weight and he's starting to throw it around. And Joel Farabee is the kind of player, he will occasionally run somebody over.
Sure.
And it's not going to happen all the time, right? He's not a power forward, I wouldn't say.
I think he's pulled back on the recklessness that he had as a rookie. You know, like you got to remember, at one point in time, I don't remember if it was his rookie season. I think it was his rookie season. It might have been his rookie season or his second season, one of the two. But he got suspended because he drilled a guy in Winnipeg, you know. And I don't think, you know, you're not seeing that guy anymore. You know, he doesn't fight. He fought a couple guys as a rookie or as a second-year player.
He fought somebody in the rookie game before his rookie year.
Right. You're not seeing him fight guys anymore, per se. But he's definitely got that tenacity back and
yes,
that kind
that
of
edge
playing. Yes.
Yep.
And that also,
it's great to say.
On top of all that, it endears yourself to John Tortorella, who loves that kind of player.
Well, sure. And I think he is a big reason as to why this team is just about 500. Like we talked, you and I chit-chatted a little bit about before the show, and we talked about Sean Couturier being back and Cam Atkinson being back, and they both look really good and kind of not pre-injury necessarily, but they're getting there. But I think Joel Farabee is another guy that you got to put on that list and is a big reason why the Flyers have 7 wins in 15 games, which I don't think either one of us would have predicted before the season.
Well, there's 2 things about I don't get surprised about the hot start, but the thing that was going to be telling for me, and the last 2 games have really kind of changed my opinion a little bit. So they lose 5-0 to LA at home. We've talked about LA. We said LA's a wagon. They're a really good team. You know, that wasn't all that shocking, and it wasn't as wide a gap as 5-0 indicates. It was 2-0 after the first period. Both goals came short order later in the period, so the game was close for 15 minutes. Then LA scores 2, and then it's still 2-0 for most of the second period, and the same thing happened. 2 late goals, and suddenly it's out of reach. It's over. You know?
Right.
And I get that, but the game against San Jose, where you had every reason to erase that LA game, and if you would have just played the game in the third period for the other 2 periods and looked like that from the jump, you probably win the game 4-2.
Probably. Yeah.
At least. But you didn't, because you came out and were flat, sloppy. It was, I mean, I put out there, one of my posts on social was that there's a special place reserved in hell for that game tape. The ugliest hockey games I've ever watched in my entire life. It's just, San Jose's bad. I get it. And you kind of knew to expect that. But when you watch them lose games 10-1 and 10-2 before that game, you're thinking the way the Flyers have played to this point this season, if they just play half of their game, they probably win.
They're winning 6-0. Right.
They win the game 5-1 too. They don't maybe score 10 goals, but they get halfway there because this is how bad that team is. And instead, they spent two periods playing sloppy and kind of playing down.
Yep.
And let them hang around. And I'll be right up front with it. I didn't know what kind of game we were going to get. They scored less than 2 minutes in, and as soon as they scored a goal within 2 minutes,
Done.
I went. No, I didn't say it was over, but my point was that this is now a possibility. It's effective immediately. If you go the entire first period and they don't score, and then it kind of is a slow build, it's a slow build. It could happen. I'm not saying that's impossible.
But when they score right away, get the building up.
Colorado played a game against them that was 1-0 the entire way until like 3 minutes left in regulation, tied the game, and then won in a shootout. That's the one overtime loss.
Right.
You know what I mean? And Colorado's a way better team than the Flyers are.
Oh, yeah.
And yet you're sitting here going, wow, they got, that was a game where they had a tough time, right? So it's possible. You can come out energized and ready to go and think that you have a shot and, hang around but not win the game.
Sure.
In their
absolutely.
case, getting the lead early was like this big, sigh of relief that we might be able to do this tonight. It's possible. And they carried it the rest of the way. And the whole time I'm watching turnover after turnover, can't get through the neutral zone, can't get anything set up. Yeah, they were getting shots, but they were weak shots. They weren't they didn't put pressure on that team like they could have until the third period. And that was the ugly part of that game. And I looked at the way that game ended. I said, okay, so here's the timeline moving forward, and just bear with me on it because it's like there was a lot to go through. There's a number of games ahead of it, but it's like you just lost to San Jose, who had no wins, lost the first 11 games of the year, 10 of them in regulation. By the way, outscored in the 2 games before you, 20-3.
Oof.
I think the other number, by the way, was in the previous 5 games they had been outscored 34-6 or something. Man. It was something pathetic.
Like I said, the Sharks really are god awful.
Come on, you've heard the jokes too. Like the joke going around was, is it possible to make an NHL team eligible for relegation? Because that would be the team.
You are not wrong. You are entirely not wrong.
And I looked at the end of the end result of this game, and my thought process was, now first of all, you immediately, the first step is you get to sit on this for 2 days. You don't play again until Friday. So the embarrassment of being the first team to lose to this team that couldn't win a game and got outscored like they did, all that, is you get to sit on it for 2 days and think about it right off the bat. Then you play Anaheim, who has been certainly an upstart group to start the year. They've been, probably, again, another team that we can put in the category of better than most people thought. Certainly. I mean, they're pulling off comeback wins against Boston, who hasn't lost anybody.
Right.
You know what I mean? And this is a team that was in position, basically, to get the number 1 pick last year.
Yep.
They got number 2, and by the way, the number 2 pick isn't half bad himself, by the way.
No, pretty good.
Leo Carlson's a pretty good player, right?
Pretty good.
But you have
that team is starting to stack some talent.
Well, right, but that's what I'm saying. I don't know if everybody thought it was coming together right away at the start of the season. And by the way, they still don't have Drysdale.
Right.
He hasn't played, so they still don't have him. But everybody else is pitching, and the start that Mason McTavish is off to has been great.
Mason McTavish is stupid. And Pavel Mintyukov looks great running their power play too.
Sure does. And
he sure does. Picked him up for the fantasy team, baby.
Oh, see, I have McTavish this year, so McTavish has been lighting it up pretty good.
I got Mintyukov off the waiver wire.
That's pretty good.
Stupid.
Anyway, but you're going in to play Anaheim, who just beat you the week before. Beat you pretty much the week before, 7-4.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a team with some offensive firepower. It's going to go against your team that just played as weak as they did in San Jose.
Right.
The literal night after, you get the team that shut you out 5-0 the night before.
Right, you're looking at a tough weekend.
Right, so you're looking at a tough weekend, back-to-back. Get another 3 days off, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. Play Wednesday in Carolina. who's turning it around, as we said.
Yep, that'll be a tough game. Yep.
2 more days off. Weekend, start a weekend back-to-back at home. First game, Vegas, who also feels like they haven't lost anybody.
In the middle of the day.
Right, in the middle of the day, of which 1 o'clock games for this team have been a disaster.
Yep.
And then finally, okay, like Columbus is the next day, but it is the back end of a back-to-back, and you're going to have to be prepared for that.
And who's your goalie?
Well, yeah, too. That's true. Well, by that point, the possibility, like as the Carter Hart possibility,
of course,
came along, because he's not hurt anymore. He's just
ill, right?
Which, look, I get it. It's tricky to navigate illness sometimes because you can wake up feeling great and then get to 12 o'clock or 1 o'clock and be like, I don't feel so good anymore.
Yeah, and it seemed like it was a bit of a late change for the Saturday game in Anaheim. Or I'm sorry, the Friday game in Anaheim. It seemed like he was gonna play until kind of the last minute. No,
that was the other way around.
That was Saturday. Okay.
Friday it was. They got to Anaheim. They practiced on Thursday. They announced that Hart should be ready to go from which would have been strictly from a
right. And then after the morning skate, they announced he was sick.
And
right.
The next morning it was Carter's not going.
Okay.
It's going to be Harrison tonight, and Harrison played really well in that game.
Yeah.
This was we just mentioned Leo Carlsson, who did ultimately get the hat trick in the game.
Right.
He had a 4th goal on his stick.
Oh, yeah.
And Harrison robbed him with the glove.
And by the way, you talked about the Ducks winning that first game 7-4. The Flyers bounced back and won this one 6-3 in Anaheim. So, they have split the season series.
Anaheim got hat tricks in both, though, because Toronto had one in Philly, and then Leo Carlsson gets another one. I think
at least Leo Carlsson's a good player.
Anaheim's got 4 hat tricks already this year or something like that.
That's wild.
Something like that. It's kind of whatever.
Doesn't Frank Vetrano have 2 or 3 of them?
He has 2 of them, I think. And
okay.
I thought that maybe it's Troy Terry who had the other one or something like that, I think.
Okay.
Because Terry's had a couple of his.
He's had a really nice little start. Absolutely.
Well, they've got that group locked up now too. Don't forget, Terry signed a contract, Ziegler signed a contract. It's
Pat Verbeek's a hard negotiator, but he has that entire core locked up except for Drysdale. And once they get,
I'm going to tell you what. For hiring a relatively unknown coach to a lot of people.
Oh yeah.
They're handling it really well. He's got a good system. I mean, he's not been afraid. He's got a little torts in him. Because he sat people down.
Yeah.
He's not afraid to sit a guy, and kind of hold that accountability across the whole thing. But that's actually, that's a good segue to the next point, because I had to write
Speaking of sitting guys.
Well, I stayed out of this for the longest time because it seemed to be a polarizing issue, and I kind of talked about it on our last show because it was a topic, but I didn't really write anything on it. And then this happened, and I ended up writing on it because I finally had an angle to it because too many times if you bring, and this is one of the things I've said from the very beginning about this whole issue, is by including Morgan Frost's name in this conversation, it becomes like a court case. And I say that meaning that you have people who are the defense and people who are the prosecutors.
Right.
And you've got one side who's trying to tell you all the things that are wrong with the situation, in terms of all the things that are wrong with the player, I should say.
Right.
Everything that, this is why he sits, because he doesn't do this, he's not this, he's this, blah, blah, this is all that stuff. And then you got the defenders who are going to tell you, but he does this, he does this, he does this. And it becomes this debate over the player himself, where I keep trying to take the player's name out of the picture and just try to describe him by age, describe him by draft. And I know draft position doesn't matter, but I'm saying the part of the equation is that you're supposed to be, as we said, you're in a year where the real goal is what
development.
Do you have? No, but what do you have? Yeah. Who's going to stick in the picture long term? Because you can go by the progress of last year when you gave everybody playing time, and you're supposed to kind of do it again and see how much you can push them to. What do we need? How do we rebuild this thing to get what we need? But you got to find out. And you can make up your mind tomorrow or yesterday or whatever on Morgan Frost and say he's not part of this thing. You could make your mind up like that right away. But you're not doing any favors to anybody by sitting a guy down and saying you're just not going to play.
Right.
You know what I mean? If your intention is, well, he's not going to be part of our future, but we got to give him a future somewhere because we need to also advance our future.
Who wants to trade for a guy who hasn't played?
Right. Then it clearly makes him damaged goods to every other team in the league because he's obviously sitting for a reason.
Wow, he can't even make the Flyers lineup. He's got to be garbage. Why would I give you a 3rd-round pick for him?
I want to I'll bring another player into this as an example because this is an easy way to identify this. Sean Walker. And this has nothing to do with Walker as a player, but I'm just going off of this because Sean Walker, the thing that we've heard all along, and Torts likes his compete level and all stuff like that, says he's a competitor, all that stuff like that. But he always goes back to, do you know how I know that he's a competitor? Because the day we got him, I called Todd McClellan, and McClellan said, you're going to love him for his compete level.
Okay.
So coaches talk, which means that if he sits there and goes, well, Morgan Frost might be on our radar, let me call Torts and find out what he doesn't like. What's the deal with this kid? Well, what's Torts saying?
Well, he's a big old lazy bum. Like, what are we saying?
Are you getting John Tortorella about this? Like,
by the way, Sean Walker, third on the team in ice time, by the way, just a hair under 21 minutes a game.
But he's kind of earned it, has he not?
No, absolutely. No, that's what I'm saying. He has played well enough that position is pretty justified, in my opinion. Like, he's
quarterbacking the second power play unit, which I don't know if it's
crazy.
Which I don't know if it's a good thing or bad thing, because we'll talk about that in a second. How the power play looks, but he is there, which means he's getting rewarded either way. So if this season was about finding out what you have in certain players, like, let's be clear about something right off the bat. Not every player who's on the roster currently or near the roster, like that could be called up or whatever, not every 23 or 24-year-old player is in the end result of a rebuild.
Absolutely.
Doesn't happen that
Can't
way.
Can't be.
Well, and I'll tell you why it can't be also, because it can't be because of the fact that everybody is subject to replacement by the 18-year-old that you just picked.
Absolutely. Who's making and it all has to do with the salary cap.
And I'm not even talking about like putting a specific on it and going like, oh, it's Mishkov. You know what I mean?
Right.
You're picking an 18-year-old with the idea that he's going to make your team.
Right. Theoretically, you're going to pick at least one or two more in the top half of the first round, let's say, over the next 2 years. So, like, this is something we're going to have to deal with over and over again.
Sure. And, like, let's put it this way, too. That in Frost's case, Mishkov's typically a winger. You know, yes, they've tried him at center a couple times.
He's probably going to be a winger at the NHL level.
Well, and right now, by the way, in Sochi, he's getting consistent right wing time.
Okay.
Like, you
fantastic.
That's great. But Cutter Gautier's been playing center. And right away, you're thinking, well, what happens when he signs? You got to put him in a center spot. Whose spot is he taking?
Yep.
And you know how they feel about Sean Couturier. You know how they feel about Noah Cates. And you know how they feel about Scott Lawton.
Yep.
I know Scott Lawton hasn't played center.
Scott Lawton's been on the wing for,
Well, he's kind of been, again, he's been the Swiss Army knife guy, because if Paling plays, then he's on the wing. If he doesn't play, he's playing center.
Right.
And that back and forth thing.
And by the way, Mitchkov, 20 points in 22 games, which in the KHL is pretty good. Pretty good. 10 goals.
It's also especially pretty good when you're 18.
Right. Hello.
18-year-olds don't do that.
Nope.
You know, not in the K,
Nope.
But
nope.
Whatever.
Pretty good. He's on pace for 27 this year, which is pretty good.
They've got guys like, that's the thing. I named all four of them kind of pretty much, because you can't deny like Denver Barkey's off to a great start in the OHL, and he's not even like close to the top scorers in that league. But I think he's pretty close to the top scorers if you're going by guys who were just drafted, who are in that age group. Like,
that overage.
If you're not talking about 19 and 20-year-olds who are on their last leg with this thing, he's right up there. Like,
okay.
I think he just had a 4-point game not long ago.
Yes, I remember seeing that.
And Bonk's picked it up too. And like, Bonk obviously is not necessarily going to be like the most offensive guy, but you're looking for both sides.
And the London Knights are a wagon, and we talk about it every show.
And then Gauthier playing in BC right now, who is quite like, the more I see it, the more I sit there and I go, I don't know how he's not a Hobie Baker finalist. I don't know how it comes to that.
I have a feling he'll get himself in that conversation.
Well, especially when you consider everybody else who left, like Fantilli goes pro and Cooley goes pro, and it's like you just took two of the guys out of the picture.
All right, there's a little bit of a power vacuum there.
Right, and he seems like he's the guy. I mean, like I
think they finally ran out of Hughes brothers, so there's not even one of those floating around.
Yeah, I think so. You think you're right.
I think they ran out.
But even the guys who were just drafted that are like top 5 or close, top 10, because they had a few. Obviously, BC does, right?
Of course.
He's still better than all of them so far.
Right.
Like, he's been better than Will Smith and Gabe Perreault and Ryan Leonard so far. And that's not to say that those guys have played bad. They've played really well. He's next level because he's a year older. He's going to he's right at the top of this list.
And he is going to transition. I don't know about seamlessly. Like, there's always some sort of transition, but I think he's going to transition pretty well to pro hockey.
What I'm encouraged about for him is that by playing at World Championships, I think that it'll be a little easier. That's one thing I'm encouraged about. But back to Frost and stuff like that for a second.
Yeah.
We want to do this. if you're trying to, because what's the thing we've heard from day one, and this was my argument about, because again, I'm taking Frost.
Play the kids.
Well, play the kids is one. And even so, okay, play the kids. You can still, Frost could sit out a game, and you're still playing kids.
Of course.
Like Forrester's in the lineup, Brink's in the lineup, and defensively you've got a young core. Like, yes, you can take those guys, like you can take one of those guys out, and you're still technically playing kids. I get it. The thing that we also heard, though, was land of opportunity.
Yep.
Well, it doesn't feel like a land of opportunity for a guy who, as of the 13th game of the season when they played in San Jose, had missed 7. So he had 6 games played, 7 on the bench in the press box. That doesn't sound like the land of opportunity to me. That sounds like taking one guy and putting him in the doghouse.
It sounds like you're picking on somebody.
And the problem I have with that is if you're trying to set a standard, and we've heard a lot of that too, right? Then the standard needs to be equal across the board, because today it's Morgan Frost, tomorrow it's who? Like, are we going to go through the same thing? And I'm using a better player as an example, but are we going to go through the same thing with Gauthier? Are we going to go through the same thing with Mishkov even?
Yep.
Like, how do you know? Because this is how John Tortorella gets when he comes up with an idea of how this player is, right?
I have a pretty good feeling, and I don't know this for sure, but just given the average tenure of an NHL coach, I'm not so sure if John Tortorella is going to be here by the time Matvei Michkov gets here.
That's possible. He will be when Gauthier gets here, though. And
it's fair.
And all I'm saying is that it's that creates a fear of, if he's going to do this the way that he does it, which is clear. Like, one of the other examples I gave during this whole thing was, okay, set aside the part where it's Frost, who's 24, has sat all these games. Oh, by the way, they rotated in Brink and Forrester at the very beginning of the year. That's swapping out two 23-year-olds, or 23 and 22, or they're both 22, I think is what it is. Defensively, Zamula and Andre were splitting time, and that's swapping out a 23-year-old and a 21-year-old. Meanwhile, yeah, and this is the other example I'm going to use because I texted this to you earlier in the week. Cam York makes a mistake and gets benched for the 3rd period. Nick Seeler makes a mistake and you get, he's so valuable to our hockey.
He gets the benefit of the doubt because he's
a veteran.
Old.
He's good he's a veteran and he's good in the room.
Yep.
You know what I mean? And like the same thing happens with Nick Delorier too, because it's like, I understand they're good in the room, but you can be good to your teammates and do things like go out to dinner and treat a young player well without playing in the game. And I'm not trying to take Nick Delorier out of the lineup. He's been in there for a reason. And I think it's fine the reason he's been in there. Like, honestly,
but there are other ways to lead.
It's not even there's other ways to lead. It's why was it the same guy? The first chance you had to make that decision, it was Frost again. When there were 4 other candidates who could come out, Forrester being one of them. Like, and I know Forrester come close too to scoring a goal, but it was the same difference, was it not? Yeah. That Forrester and Frost had nothing to show for a bunch of stuff. So then what's the difference so far? You're picking on one guy kind of, and you're moving, and the standard is hard to set when the goalposts are shifted.
Right.
And from players.
And of course there may be things we don't know, right? Like maybe Morgan Frost has a poor attitude about it. And I don't know anything. I'm not speculating anything, but maybe Morgan Frost has a poor attitude about it and Tyson Forster, keeps his head up and stays chipper and blah, 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 blah. And it might just be something as simple as that. And I don't expect Torts to come out and just absolutely torch Frost and go, well, his attitude stinks, so he's sitting. No, except I actually kind of do, because he probably would just say that. But
and I get that he didn't want to answer the question, but like after the San Jose game, he asked if it was a difficult decision to take Frost out of the line. He went no, and he backtracked on it the next day because he said he didn't want to answer the question at that moment. But the fact of the matter remains that it comes across like, nope, not difficult at all because I don't like him.
All right, I yanked him because he sucks. Yep.
Right, because I don't like what he's doing, so I pulled him. Done deal. End of story. And I'm the coach, right? Like, you know what I mean? The example that I give it to, and maybe this is because I'm married to one, but I use a teacher example because, and I want think about it. When you're in a class, if you're in a class and you're the student, like, and you have a teacher who's up there explaining something and trying to give a message and get a point across, right? And they start talking about all this stuff, right? Like they'll talk about what you need to do. It's about the fine details, whatever. And it could be depending on a variety of factors. It could depend on your track record, like your grades. It could depend on your attitude. It could depend on how you behave in class, whatever it may be. But every now and then a teacher will sit there and kind of look straight at you or the person that they kind of have beef with or that they don't think is doing the best that they could do. And they kind of throw a like I'll kind of role play it right now for you.
Okay.
To an extent. So if you're talking about all the things that Morgan Frost needs to do, right? Like you go, you got to work. He's not working hard enough along the boards. Got to be willing to get into the dirty areas and make some plays because you see how these guys do it or whatever. It's about fine details. It's about man, maybe we need to go to the net more, right, Kyle?
Right.
What did I just do in front of the whole room, right? Like now
put
you just
directly on the spot.
Right now, you just brought it to the attention that you're trying to get a point across, and you have something specific that you're trying to get the point across to.
Yep.
And then you also can formulate your opinion based on those other things. Like grades are like your stats. You can go look at the stats afterwards and say, well, look at what the numbers say, and look at what all of our analytics say, and all this, that, and the other thing. And I'm just gonna go, and behavior is like the eye test in towards his mind, right? Like, like he just doesn't show up enough for me. Or like a teacher would sit there and tell you he's fidgety in class. I don't like how he's fidgety. It looks like he's not paying any attention. He's not invested in whatever, right?
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And it creates these impressions of people where and the same thing happens on the opposite sense where if you have like the star student in your opinion, which doesn't necessarily mean that they're the best student, but that they're working as hard as they can to be the best.
Just because they're your favorite student doesn't mean they're the best.
But a la Noah Cates or Owen Tippett, for example, then the same thing applies, right? Like then you're kind of looking at them with a different because to you their track record is they're good enough. They are. I expect this from them. So one bad test or one bad quiz or whatever isn't going to change my opinion. Right. Or one bad day, like answering questions in front of a class, it's not going to change my opinion on them because typically they're better than that. So I'm not going to lose sight of that. But the student that I don't like, you know what I mean? I'm gonna keep, and I'm gonna use him as an example in the class, and I'm gonna use him like in this case.
You're gonna make an example out of him.
Right, I'm gonna make an example out of him, but I'm gonna make an example out of him in terms of participation. I'm gonna make an example out of him in meetings, like in terms of when they do film work. I'm sure that I'm sure that they're pointing out certain guys.
Right.
I'm sure that some of them are directed, and like that's why I throw Cam York into the mix too, because York kind of gets this treatment too, because it's the same thing. Like I said, it's the same thing as York makes a mistake. You end up
benched
or a series of mistakes. I'm going to put him on the bench for an entire period and make it clearly obvious, right?
Right. Same
guy does it who's 30 years old. It's okay.
Not a problem. He'll bounce back.
But why? Because I love what he brings to the team. He's so valuable.
Yep.
And he's not part of the whole picture. And sometimes you just have to look up and also acknowledge when everybody's bad.
Right.
San Jose game doesn't provide you with anything, so you can't pick anybody out of that group.
Right. And the other thing about all this is that none of this can really be all that surprising, right? Like this is John Tortorella being who John Tortorella is.
Right, but this is
he's done this going back forever and ever and ever. Amen.
Mm-hmm. But that's where the questions arise because sure he's done this going back as long as he's been a coach. But when you're coaching Tampa to a Stanley Cup, or you're coaching the Rangers into the deeper parts of the playoffs, or you're coaching in Columbus and trying to make the playoffs,
you're supposed to be sitting the kids,
finding the best players. You're not in a rebuild trying to find out what you have, and it creates this cloud of.
Then why is he still your coach?
Because they think that he can do those things, and to an extent, like here's the thing: if you can bring like. If Frost is the one-off in this, and if Frost is also doing things that go along with the notion of it, like the part that I have a problem with is Frost had the strongest second half of the season last year point-wise. He was the leader in points, and I get that. And you owe it to the player at this point, at 24 years old, to see can you top it? Can you match it? Can you do can you play to that level? Because if you can't, then we have more information about where you belong in this rebuild. But if you just give up right away, think about it.
Right.
2 games. They played 2 games, and they had 1 bad game in Ottawa, and all of a sudden it was, well,
he's done.
That's the guy I'm moving. And he didn't play for 6 more games. That's where it's absurd, because you're not giving him a fair shot to replicate it. He sat out 1 game last year.
Right.
And that was it. And whether that was by necessity because you didn't have Couturier and Atkinson and all that stuff like that, and that's the thing about them. Like I said earlier in the show, they might screw around this year and win 35 games. Truly. And the thing is if you can come away from each game, like what can we do with the last handful of games? Truthfully, go look at the last handful of games. Frost scores 2 goals against LA. Well, that's good. The 24-year-old player scored 2 goals, helped lead your team to a win. You won 6-3 against Anaheim. Tippett had 2 goals, and Sanheim's doing some things, and Louis Belpedio scored a goal for you there.
Yep.
I mean, I'm not throwing Belpedio into the typical.
No, I know.
But I'm looking for something fun to say about
We love Louis Belpedio on this show. I refuse to hear any Louis Belpedio slander.
But that happens. Sam Harrison gets a win for you there. Looked really good in doing that. You go to the Buffalo game and Brink scored a goal. Like, if you can pull away from wins, good positive results, that it's also led by the younger players that you're trying to figure out more about, then that's positive. But if it's all veteran driven, like when they win a game, because they haven't had one like this yet, it's kind of been balanced because you got both, right? So but if they win a game 4-1, and sure, let's start with Carter Hart stands on his head and helps you win that game, which it's not that he's not part of the rebuild, but maybe it's not sustainable because that goaltending play is not going to be that.
You can't expect that out of him every night, right?
Right. So that's number one. Let's say Cam Atkinson scores 2 of the goals and Sean Walker scores another one, and Garnet Hathaway scores the 4th one. So it's 4 guys who don't factor into the picture as long-term. Or the scoring happens very opportunistic, or that you scored 4 goals on 19 shots because it was that kind of shooting night, from a shooting percentage standpoint, then it's kind of unrealistic and it's fool's gold that you're winning games like that. If you're winning games by playing better than the other team and it's largely driven by your younger players, then you might screw around and win a bunch of games because your team is just getting that much better and they're all part of the picture. But if they're not, then you have to still make those tough decisions because at the end of the day, Cam Atkinson scored a goal last night too.
Yep.
Right? Scored on Saturday night against LA. That's what now? 8 on the year, I believe it was.
Something like that. He's lighting it up.
And that's all well and good. But you can't lose sight of the fact that at his age and with his contract status, what's the logical next move? He's not going to be part of this thing at some point.
Correct.
I don't know if it's going to be this year. He's got another full year left in the contract. You may still not be able to trade it. But the best thing that you've got going for you right now is that, yes, he is scoring, he's playing well, and it's going to mean he has value to somebody down the road. You're not going to tell me there's not teams out there that are looking at him scoring 8 goals a year or 8 goals early in the year on a pace to probably get to 40.
Right.
That's great. And say, I wouldn't want to add that to my team at under $6 million. I'll do it.
Absolutely. That's 100% an asset that you can flip.
And the Walker example is a really good one because Walker is really here on a rental contract, and it's been great that you're getting more out of him than you thought. But the idea is that you can't lose sight of the fact that because of that, someone may overpay.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And Sean Walker is a guy that I'm willing to see Torts overplay. Like, I'm okay.
Well, yes.
Right. Given the circumstances, given the fact that he's got 1 year left, given the fact that it's a movable deal, given that it's a defenseman, which is always in higher demand than forwards, just because there's only 6 of them on your lineup.
Right.
I'm okay with Torts pumping his tires, kind of no matter what, if it's working. Frankly, I'm willing to give him, if he wants to play Sean Walker 26 minutes a night, go for it.
Right. Now, the fear of that is, and this kind of goes hand in hand with the Frost situation a little bit too, because if Frost's not playing and you either have visions of him playing to find out what he is and if he fits into your rebuild, or if you've already made the decision anyway, but you've got to get some value up for him to be moved, one way or the other, it kind of goes against the idea that what they also say at the very early stages of the offseason when the new era thing was being introduced, it was that the 3 of them were going to work together. That it was going to be Torts and Briere and Jonesy, and it was going to be the work.
And also Val Camillo, who's gone, and
oh no, I'm talking about strictly from the rock.
Oh, from the hockey. Okay.
The hockey upside, that it was going to be a triumvirate of hockey operations people, Torts included, that they were going to be kind of working together to figure out what direction this needs to go, right? And there are times where it feels like that's not the case right now, because if you were in Danny Briere's shoes, you should be getting into Torts' ear about the fact that, like, you can't just sit the guy out for 6 straight games. You've got to figure out a way to make this work.
Right. You can't. This kid's a recent first-round draft pick. You can't be doing this.
But even if your meetings are, I don't know if he's part of our future, but we've got to play him a little bit because if he's going to be moved, we've got to keep him in the lineup. You can't just
we got to show him off.
We've got to give it, like, at least show that he belongs in the lineup in some way, even if he's not the best player.
Right.
And of course, Torch probably doesn't want to hear that because he's trying to win games by putting the best lineup on the ice. But you've got to be realistic about what your best lineup is sometimes. In terms of, I watched Frost sit out games, the rest of the lineup looked like crap, and it's like, well, then he can't be the worst one. Like, there's got to be other players who you could do this with and at least create a rotation.
Right. There has to be something.
And the other part of the equation is, and this comes into the case with like a guy like Walker, is this is where Torts' influence can't be so high because you can't let Torts talk the other two into, well, we should keep him.
Fair.
You know what I mean? Like,
right. He's good for the boys. You
can't lose sight on the 3-year plan here.
Yes. And I hope, I pray that Danny and Jonesy have the bigger picture in mind.
I think they do. What I'm worried about is that they get overruled because all of a sudden, from literal one season to the next, because Torts only had 1 year.
Right.
So literal one season to the next, Torts went from being the new guy to being the most established part of that hockey ops triumvirate.
But that's only because everybody else got fired out from underneath him. Like,
right,
he didn't do anything to climb the ladder. The ladder got pulled out from under everybody above him.
But remember who you're working with is all I'm saying, because
the
ego can swell when you're the guy who's at the top, and it's like, well, Danny, you're the new guy. You've never worked in hockey ops before. Trust me on this one. I know what I'm doing. You know what I mean? And then that creates this, and that's what I'm saying. Like, if I don't know that it's at that point or that it won't be or whatever, but like, you can like a player all you want to. You just have to keep your eyes on the prize here, and the prize is the end result of the rebuild, not, So just be realistic is all I'm trying to say.
I'm gonna go out there on a limb and say that if Dan Hilferty hired Danny Briere and Keith Jones for their respective roles and didn't properly vet that they would be able to stand up to John Tortorella,
right,
then we just need to start all over again, and Comcast needs a new CEO. Because, like, if that's... We just did this. We just did this for 40 years, and it didn't work. It's just... We talk new era orange. It's going to be the same era of mediocrity.
Right.
Because you cannot have your head coach overriding your general manager and your president of hockey ops when it comes to keeping Sean Walker. Unacceptable. Tear the whole franchise apart and start over.
Well,
again.
The other part of the equation is that you're getting lucky right now in the sense that Walker gets to be showcased because Rasmus Ristolainen's not coming back anytime soon, apparently, and Mark Stahl's still out with injury too. So
which by the way, I think is a major factor as to why your defense has actually looked reasonable this year. Addition by subtraction.
Not so much with Ristolainen, because I think Ristolainen could make it a little bit better with the physicality, and he's done some things offensively.
Maybe.
Okay, let's put it this way. I would slide, I'm trying to think. Like, if you told me Ristolainen was replacing Sealer, I would give you, I think you would have some improvement there.
Maybe. That's fair. But Nick Sealer just isn't an NHL player.
And let's be realistic. For as well as Belpedio's played, if Ristolainen played over Belpedio,
that's fair.
He's probably better. Let's be real.
Probably.
But see, this is the thing, though. This is, again, I'd be curious. What do you do when one of them comes back? Is it just so easy that Belpedio comes out and goes back to the minors?
That's probably the easy answer, yeah. Because he just doesn't have the name or the pedigree or anything.
Well, and that's fine because he's not necessarily a guy who I think is going to be here long term either.
Right.
I would love to also see you just have the guts to sit there and go, Risto's back, Sealer's coming out, Belpedio staying in.
That would be fantastic.
I just want to see him have the guts to do it because...
even if it's only for a game or two, even if you give Sealer a game or two off and then you send Belpedio back to the minors, I'd like to see the choice get made at least temporarily.
Well, and I'm not trying to use Belpedio as the only example here. It's just I want to see you have the guts to actually sit some of these guys.
Yep.
In the sense that when they're the weakest link, when you look at everybody you put in, if you evaluate it properly, I want to see you do it. I'm not.
By the way,
they don't bring something to the table. I'm just trying to sit here and say that they're not the end all be all. And if you want to see everybody, you should, honestly, you should actually be curious enough with the way Belpedio's played that you should kind of want to see him next to somebody who's not Nick Sealer not Nick Sealer, not Igor Zamula or Victor Meteg.
I'd love to see him next to the best defenseman you've had all season, by the way, which, by the way, is Travis Sanheim, who all of a sudden looks like that contract's not so terrible. And he's still making a lot of money, don't get me wrong. It might still be a little bit, There's
a reason for that as well, by the way.
But Travis Sanheim looks really good so far.
Yes, he does, and I give the player a lot of credit for doing the things he needed to do to get better. But I also want to talk about Tortorella in this case as well, because they
Okay.
were not exactly at the best,
No.
place either coming into the year, or going into the offseason at least.
After last year, yeah.
After last year. And I kind of have this kind of ties into the Frost thing as well, because Frost just re-upped this year. He just re-signed in the offseason, 2-year deal, right? So obviously he's here with the intention that there's 2 years to go on this thing and whatnot, right? Like he's going to be here for 2 years to figure it out. But 2 years is not that long that you can't move it.
Correct.
You know what I mean? When you sign somebody literally before he's ever played a regular season game in front of the new head coach, and you sign him to an extension like they did with Travis Sanheim, what you found out in the offseason is that you can formulate your opinion of him, and you can say that you don't know if he's part of the picture, and you can try to trade him. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And the market told you everything you needed to know about it, because you thought you had somebody to take him, and it didn't work out. And
to be fair, it didn't work out because a player didn't waive their no trade protection. So it wasn't anything like the organization bailed on it, or it was something beyond the Flyers' control.
But either way, when that came into play, and he was going to start the year here, the other part of the equation was you now had to talk to the player and kind of make it clear that it wasn't going to be...
It's not that we don't like you.
Well, right. You're trying to...
Right, like after you just tried to trade him. It's not that we don't like you. It's just a good deal came along and we had to,
But the challenge to John Tortorella was make it work. Because he's got 8 years on the contract. Make it work. This isn't Kevin Hayes where you're going to win. You've got to figure out a way to.
Yep.
And what did
now he's got trade protection, right?
Well, he does. But what did they do with him so far this season? They've kind of taken the reins off a little bit. They've told him to play more aggressively from an offensive standpoint.
And boy, has he!
His minutes. All of a sudden, and he didn't get any points in the game in LA, but he did. He had a 3-point game against Anaheim. What did that equate to? All of a sudden, 14 and 14. He was a point per game player going into Saturday.
Yep. And when
games into the season. Do you know, by the way, and I'm going to pull it up for a second because I have to update it a little bit. I did this with.
I was about to ask, when's the last time a Flyers defenseman was point per game?
That's a good question.
Was it Ghost's rookie year? And I don't even think he maintained that, but he had it for the first whatever. But
the closest thing was would be when in Ghost's third year, when he put up, 65, I think, in the season. That was probably the closest.
Oh, yeah. He was so good that year.
God,
remember when the Flyers had a good power play?
Oh, that's, we do have to get to that.
Oh, rest in peace.
Well, we'll get there in a minute. So what I want to do is I'm going back to Travis Sanheim's game log from last season.
Okay.
Because I want you to try to tell me when you think that Travis Sanheim got his 14th point.
Oh, we talked about this. We did this on the last show. It was like in December, wasn't it?
Hold on. Well, we can continue to do it because, by the way, before I do this really quick, let me go just actually give you the final. So just for a second here, he's played 15 games this season, 2 goals, 14 points. We just said that, right?
Yep.
81 last year. He had 7 goals and 23 points. So he's already 9 points shy of his total from last.
He'll get that by Christmas.
Pretty close at this point, yeah. So give me a second to actually calculate this.
Okay. His 14th point last year, I'm gonna guess.
Okay, I found his 14th point.
And you said he ended with 23?
Yes, I found his 14th point. And
February 17th.
No, it was earlier than that.
Okay.
The way I'm gonna ask this to you is you can give me 2 different answers and I'll give it to you correctly. You can either give me the date or tell me what game number it was.
Okay.
Like how far into the season did he play? Because right now, like we just said, he got to 14 in 14.
Right.
So how many games did he play last year to get to 14?
46.
Not bad. It's less than that.
Okay. Where are we at?
So his 14th point of the season last year came on December 23rd.
Poof.
But that was 35 games into the season, so it took him nearly half of the season to get to 14. Wow. And then obviously he cooled off again for stretches down the late in the season, and didn't.
But so did everybody.
Well, kind of, yes.
That team was. Whew.
Because okay,
embarrassing.
here's your reason. You're probably wondering, well, how did he get to 14 in that length of time? Because we had mentioned that like 10 games in, he only had 1 point last year.
Right.
Like that's how long it took him to get any points. He had a stretch in right around I'll just say right around Thanksgiving. So literally about the week we're coming into.
Yeah.
They played. So was this the night before Thanksgiving? They played Washington and lost in overtime. He had an assist. The next game was on Black Friday. He had an assist. Didn't have any points against the Islanders in the game after that, and then went on a 4-game point streak after with 5 points total. So that was, what did I just say? So it was 5, 6, 7 points in 7 games. So he
Something
had a
like
little
that,
run.
yeah.
And actually, the 2 games before the one I mentioned to start the whole thing, he had a goal and an assist against Montreal as well.
Okay.
And had 2 there. So he had 9 and 9, I think it was.
So he's been a little streaky, and obviously he could just cool off and, not score for 2 months. Like that is a very real possibility in his game.
Sure. Well, but at least right now what you're seeing is, like we said, like 15 games into last season, he had 2 assists. That was it. Right. He didn't even have a goal until the 18th game of the season, which is exactly where I'm starting, like that kind of timeline.
Right.
He didn't get on a real point roll until 18 games, 20 games into the season, and he's already 9 points shy of his total from last year. And oh, by the way,
he looks good.
And oh, by the way, if we're really keeping track of all the other stuff, by the way, the season before was 80 games, 7 goals, 31 points. That's sorry, no, that's not career high. I'm sorry. His first full season in 2018-19, he had 9 goals and 35 points. But even then, he's on track for that too.
Yep. Yeah, he's looking good. Like, again, obviously he could cool off, but as of right now, through 15 games,
the goals may, because he's not really as much of a goal scorer, and 2 goals so far is, you're like, if you're nearing the quarter mark, if you're still at 2 goals at the quarter mark, you're on pace for 8.
Although the one where he drove the net, that was pretty.
Oh, the fourth one, yeah, the fourth one in Anaheim,
right across the front of the goal mouth, just absolutely.
I texted you this too, like for 2 teams that don't exactly have the highest of hopes in the world.
That was a fun game.
Yeah,
I think it was good because the talent level was good, right? Like if one of these teams is playing Colorado, you're expecting certain things. If one of these teams is playing blah blah blah, but these are teams kind of on a similar level. I'm not surprised they've been some good fun games.
What also helped is it was totally wide open. I mean, there were
there's no defense.
Yeah.
The 2 best defensemen in that game were Travis Sanheim and Radko Gudas, and that tells you all you need to know.
At the very least, the Flyers only gave up 1 even strength goal in the game, 2 power play goals.
Wild. So, all right.
Power play, really quick.
Yeah. Power play real quick, and then we'll do a quick little look ahead, and we'll get on out of here.
Yeah. Because the power play's been terrible. Let's just...
Terrible. And... It feels like it's been 84 years since the Flyers had a good power play.
It's really hard to play 15 games of an NHL season and come away with 4 total power play goals.
Yeah.
I mean, it's bad. And
not what you want to say.
It is probably the most glaring issue they have, because goaltending has been fairly solid. I mean, they've had some rough games goaltending wise, but it's been fairly solid. I mean, let's put it this way. Now you have wins across the board for, Carter Hart's won a few games. Harrison's won a couple of games, and now you've got Cal Peterson with a win too.
By the way, Flyers are tied for last in the league in power play percentage with the St. Louis Blues. Yep.
Who, by the way, I think the Blues scored a couple of power play goals in their last game, which probably helped that, because the Blues scored eight goals in Saturday's game.
Something like that. They scored a bunch.
8-2, yes. And right away, I'm going through really quick. Well, they had a shorthanded goal. There's a power play goal. There's another power play goal. They had 2 power play goals and 2 shorthanded goals in addition to 4 even strength goals.
Oof, crazy.
But this is the thing. For a team that bad, power play wise, 2 power play goals will elevate your percentage pretty well.
Absolutely.
Night, which means that when the Flyers went 0 for again against LA and Anaheim for that matter, because I don't know how far back it goes at this point, but they're like 0 for their last 25 or something like that.
I need you to look at the Dallas, Minnesota breakdown from Sunday, because you're talking about goals not scored 5-on-5. There were 11 goals in this game. 3 of them were 5-on-5.
Wow, when I last checked, I think it was 4-3 Dallas, so 8-3 is kind of a shocker.
Yeah, with 2 power play goals and a shorty in the third period.
Couple of 3 even strength in the first period. Two power play for Dallas and one power play for Minnesota in the second period.
And a power play goal in the first period.
Two more power plays and a shorthanded in, Wyatt Johnson again.
Dallas was 5 for 8 on the power play. That is stupid. Sorry.
Wyatt Johnston's killing it this year, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
Seven goals, and I got 6 assists. He's got 13 points already.
Crazy. Dallas is doing some things, man. Dallas is a good team.
Hey, I had them as my Stanley Cup pick.
Rope Hintz is having a good season. Miro Heiskanen's having a good season. Jason Robertson's warming up.
Just wanted that Rope Hintz mention.
I don't know what you're talking about. But
in just this game alone, by the way, so Robertson had 3 points, Johnston had 3 points, Heiskanen had 3 assists.
Yeah, he did.
They have 4 other guys who had 2 points. Jamie Benn had 2 assists. Sagan had 2 assists. Duchesne had a goal and an assist. Did everybody in the no, not everybody. There's I think there's two forwards didn't have a point and 4 defensemen.
Dallas is a good team. All right, Flyers power play. Anything else we got on that?
Well, yeah, sure, of course.
Okay.
The power play stinks.
Bad.
It's
bad.
Yeah. They are really going to the well to try different things to the point where at one point in time they had Morgan Frost net front. Now they've got Tyson Forrester net front. This is a guy who's got a shot, by the way. But Tyson Forrester net front because the idea is let one bounce off of him and maybe it'll go in so it can boost his confidence. That's where we're at with this level of this type of stuff, and it's really throwing it against the wall and seeing what sticks, obviously, but also just this idea that I don't know, you can try all the stuff you want to. At the end of the day, if you don't, they keep talking about simplifying it, and yet they don't do the thing that simplifies it the most, which is have the guy who quarterbacks the thing shoot the puck.
Crazy. What a concept.
Because everything right now is trying to pass for the perfect play every time, and it's
I think they're nervous about that shot getting blocked out to center and it goes the other way because they're so aggressive on the penalty kill that they're assuming other teams are going to be doing it too.
Well, it goes hand in hand with the other problem that they have, which is, and I'm calling it shooting accuracy, because if I say shooting percentage, it's based off of how many goals you
shots
score.
On net, right?
Yeah. Because I haven't seen a team like this one that has probably 4 or 5 guys that we could say have a really solid shot, right? If we took a look at the nicest goals that some of these guys have scored, Konechny can shoot it really well, Farabee can shoot it really well, Forrester's got an above average shot,
Tippett's got a cannon,
Tippett's got a shot, Brink has shown a shot at times, but not I wouldn't say he's the headliner of the group, obviously.
Fair.
But Brink has shown a shot on occasion. Certainly, Cam Atkinson's got scorer's touch. A bunch of these guys, and there's more to come, obviously, as you go through. As we get further and further with it, but these guys miss the net so much.
Hire a shooting coach.
Break out the shooter tutor and get somebody who teaches you how to use everything, because it's look, the process is rushed. They feel rushed to take these. The thing that really gets me when I watch this is forget about the shooting coach angle of this for a second. Everybody's in the NHL for a reason, right?
Sure, absolutely.
I can watch a bunch of different players, and it nearly happened 3 or 4 times in the game they played against Buffalo a couple weeks back, because Buffalo even had a goal taken away that was a nice shot, right? Every time I turn around, a guy gets space, takes a shot, picks his spot, hits the spot, and goes in. Right. All the time against them.
Right. And if you give an NHL player time and space in a scoring position, you're pretty likely to score on average.
How many times am I and this is why it goes hand in hand with the power play too, because it can be this type of thing. It can be that it can be that setup where the guy's on the flank and you're just trying to get it to him, within that one-timer position.
Right.
Or the guy who stands out and who's in the bumper position, who's standing in the slot waiting for that pass from low to high maybe, or something like that, whatever you want to do, right? How many times do they get that opportunity potentially and they miss the net with it? How many times do we watch?
All the time.
How many times do we watch teams against them? San Jose scored a goal just like that.
Yep.
William Eklund standing there waiting for it, gets it, shoots it, goes in.
Finishes it.
And it may not even be in the spot that you're trying to get it to, but it's on net and you're forcing the goalie to make a save.
Yep.
You're doing it by that's speed by puck movement, and And even off, like we've seen guys off the rush do it. And I'm not trying to take away from the fact that the Flyers had in Anaheim specifically, by the way.
I was going to say the Anaheim game.
No, but we brought up the Sanheim goal that was pretty. Tippett had a really nice one. Like, I'm not trying to take away from that type of stuff.
Sure, there are still good things that happen.
But how many times do we see them play a game and miss these opportunities? And
a lot.
And I wonder how many games would change. Like, truthfully, this is one of the areas where Tortorella's right. They can come away from games and look through what the scoring chances say and actually say they were in a lot of these games because they get scoring chances. They're generating.
They just need to hit the net more.
But they're missing the net a lot.
Right.
Like I genuinely would like.
They're really taking that. They're really taking that. You miss 100% of the shots. You don't take things super seriously.
I guess so, but they're missing the ones they do take.
Right.
Like that's the problem with that whole thing. I just wish that they would find a way to figure that out because what's been nice about, and it's kind of going back to something we've already talked about in the show a little bit, but what's nice about watching the Cutter Gauthier highlights, and I know it's all of it's highlights, which means it's always going to have kind of a good result to it.
Yeah.
Where he misses the net on occasion too. But there's a lot of times where he's taking a shot and you're going like, does this guy miss? I mean, here's one, for example, too. He scored a goal, I think, on a power play. On a one-timer from by the way, he's shooting like a left-handed Ovechkin on some of these power plays. Because he goes to the dot and he stands there and somebody gets to him and he just unleashes it.
Love that.
Scoring like that. But he came in and entered the zone, took a shot, and yes, it's going to go down as a miss. It hit the post.
Yeah.
Right there, you're still picking a spot and trying to maybe get posted in and you missed by an inch and it doesn't go in instead. And then you scored 5 seconds later anyway. Like, it would be great. Like when that shows up, that would be that's going to be earth shattering for this team. And
absolutely.
This kind of ties into the San Jose game a little bit too, because the San Jose game was ugly. It was sloppy. We've already said that, obviously. But what did it show more than anything? They've got players like Sean Couturier and Cam Atkinson in the veteran group. Yeah, they've got some up-and-comers that they've got, but they still don't have a star.
Right.
They still don't have that guy right now who takes it all over. Like, even when they do kind of take over a game, it's like this line is playing well. So the three of them are playing well enough that they're having a really good game, but it's not one guy. Like, even when Tippett's scoring goals, because Tippett had 3 goals over the weekend.
Yeah.
And you're going, well, he made a play on the one, and that was really impressive because he made it, got control of the puck, made a move around Vetrano, got in on goal, scored a goal.
Right.
But what about the one that he scores to open the scoring against LA, where it's Sean Walker makes the play, blocks a shot, gets a lead pass to him, now you go finish it.
It's just a good shooter on a breakaway, right?
But it goes hand in hand. You didn't create the opportunity by being super elite. You were in the right place at the right time to help create that. So, you know what I mean? Like you have a role in it, but so does somebody else. So it's always kind of at least 2 or 3 guys working together, not one guy who you sit there and you come away from the game and be like, well, he was the best player on the ice clearly, and he did all this stuff. Even in a loss when they played Anaheim, Leo Carlson was the guy who you're like, well, better watch him.
He's good.
Yep. He's taking this game over.
Absolutely.
He was doing it by himself, not any Flyers.
And the Flyers are missing that takeover talent, and haven't had that takeover talent in a long time.
They haven't. And that's the hard sell in a rebuild because you're still watching a team that doesn't have the superstar.
Exactly.
That's
and
the hard part.
It's tough to sell. And obviously, I think the Flyers have done a really decent job, honestly. But it's tough to sell your fan base on, all right, so we have a star, but he'll be here in 3 years. And they've done a decent job, and they've found a good way to kind of get you excited to get in the building with the Bobby Brinks and the young players, the Cam Yorks. There are things to build around, but as of right now, no, I do think you're right. They are missing that takeover talent
because you're just starting the rebuild.
Exactly. You're still stocking the cupboard.
But the idea, but see, this is what lends to the other side of the conversation, which is yes, you're still a ways away from those guys. Like Gauthier and Mishkov could be the first of those 2 types of guys who could potentially be in that group.
Absolutely,
we see them, but you still want to have more opportunities at that level of player. So
sure,
winning doesn't help that equation, and certainly look, they're still not in the clear completely from being one of those teams. It was interesting because when they lost to San Jose and they were where they were in the standings, by the way, it was becoming very apparent really quickly, especially if they didn't gain any points in Anaheim or LA, which was
we're going to start slipping real quick.
Which was also a distinct possibility because it was like, hey, listen, for as bad as Calgary was when they started the year, they would, if the Flyers got no more points this weekend and didn't win those 2 games, they were at 11 points going in.
Yep.
It would have been 1 point ahead of Calgary, and it would have been like, well,
right towards the bottom.
How about this? If Edmonton would have continued to win the games they did, they would have been within 4.
Yep.
Like, that would have been, like, think about it. You would have been very dangerously close to being the team that goes to, like, second worst in the standings. And only above San Jose.
It's funny because I think that actually transitions as well to looking ahead here, because I do think that this week is going to be a week that's going to be tough for the Flyers to get points. You're traveling across the country. I know you have a couple days off, but you're traveling across the country and playing in Carolina, and you have a home game against Vegas and Columbus. Columbus is the only game that you're looking at as probable points in some fashion. If you can steal a point against Carolina or Vegas, you feel pretty okay about it at this point in time.
Carolina, the thing with Carolina, this is such an interesting schedule, by the way, because both teams are going to play Wednesday and having not played since Sunday.
Okay.
Like I almost, like, for a second I was wondering if there's, like, are the Flyers going to be the well-rested team coming in and Carolina will have played on Monday or Tuesday or something like that?
Right. Saturday.
Yeah, they haven't played. They'll have played Saturday and not since. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and they traveled from Tampa in the same time zone. And
right. I mean, the Flyers do get it. Like, honestly,
of course, there's a couple days. It's not a big deal.
But if you're going to come back from California for a week and then get a couple of days to sit and wait, at least sit and wait before you play a team like that.
That's fair.
I'm sure. But Carolina has all of a sudden, like, or not, I won't say all of a sudden, but they've quickly vaulted themselves into second in the division after a slower start. Like, you look at where the Rangers are. The Rangers haven't started slow at all. Like, the Rangers got off to a good start. They've only lost 3 games on the year so far. They've got 21 points. They're actually currently playing as we speak and losing at the moment by a goal to Columbus, by the way, which is really interesting.
That is funny.
But nonetheless, like, you're right. You know what I'm saying. Like, they've been off to such a good start. But Carolina's kind of come on and become the team that we thought they were going to be after that start. Like, at one point in time, weren't they like 4-5 on the season or something?
They were in rough shape. They might have been worse than that. They might have been 3-5.
Well, okay, even so. Yeah. What I'm saying is that now they're 9-6.
They're back.
So if you go from 5 to 9-6, you're winning 5 of your last 6. You're doing something.
Rod's got the boys going again. So
and like you didn't think they would.
And then of course the defending Stanley Cup champions come to Philly, and that's never an easy matchup.
Won 12 of 15 to start. Like, only had one of the best like starts after winning a cup in NHL history.
And also so has Boston, to just defy absolutely everybody once again. But whatever. Maybe one day I'll give Boston the credit they deserve.
And here's the thing, like with Columbus too, because Columbus is definitely the team on this list that is the most likely to be a win.
That's your winnable game. Yeah.
But if they also were able to play a team like the Rangers tough and things like that, one of the things you have to also consider, I'm going to assume that the I'm going to check obviously, but I'm assuming as I'm checking that Columbus plays in Washington the night before as well. That's actually really interesting. So this is what makes it even more winnable for the Flyers, is they're going to play Vegas at 1:00 in the afternoon on Saturday. Columbus is playing in Washington at 7:30 on Saturday, and then has the 5:30 start on Sunday against the Flyers. So that's a really quick turnaround. Who knows who their goalie's going to be? How they're going to handle all that. So you've got a lot of things to consider with that. And, right now, that probably makes, like you said, it the winnable game. But otherwise, and then you're into the week. Like, again, it's a weird schedule right now because they've got a lot of breaks in between. Like, that was my other theory of the whole thing with the points. Like, if they didn't win this weekend after losing to San Jose and gain no points, then for 3 days, other teams are playing while you're sitting there. And then you play Carolina. And then 2 more days go by and you don't play again. And then you play the defending Cup champs.
Oh, right.
You might gain no points in those 5 games, and everybody else is passing you.
Well, and all of a sudden it starts to feel pretty bleak because you just haven't won in a week and a half.
If they didn't, the scary part is when they didn't win in San Jose, and I thought that was going to be the win of the week. When they didn't win that one after losing to, look, the first loss was still LA. I get it. Like, they only had 2 in a row at that point. But I looked and I went, Anaheim and LA could be 2 more. Now it's 4. Carolina 5. Vegas 6. And if they lose to the Blue Jackets for 7, then it's Islanders, Rangers, Islanders, and at literally the same time, right up against the same weekend of the season, you could be looking at another 10.
Yep. All very losable.
In their own way. I mean, there's look, I'm not going to mention, we don't have time today to do it, but there's been some trouble brewing in Long Island.
Yeah, and we will get into that maybe on our next show. We'll see how the time goes on that.
So that's an interesting thing, because of the fact that when that schedule becomes the looking ahead portion and there's 2 games against them, just hypothetically speaking, what happens if you steal one against Carolina this time because you came close last time? You know, what happens?
Absolutely.
And then beat Columbus like you think you're supposed to, and you've got maybe 2 more winnable ones in front of you. Like,
sure, and we talk about it all the time. The skill gap in the NHL is smaller than it's ever been.
The other reason, I know, and the other reason I'm bringing it up is because what else do we always talk about all the time? We're coming up on that date, you know, that
Thanksgiving, getting the playoffs.
Thanksgiving, and it's you know, if you're there, like one of the teams that I put in that picture right away as I look at everything is, you know, Detroit's one of them, because Detroit got off to a really good start. But I also sit there and I go, Anaheim was one of them, to be honest, because Anaheim, it's like, if they're in the picture at that time,
why not go for it? Yeah.
That's an indication that they could be there throughout the year, and they're right out. Okay, well, better yet,
especially if the Oilers are not, right? That just opens up another spot in an already weak Pacific Division.
Here's a better one for you instead. Anaheim dropped out of the playoff picture because they lost on Saturday or on Friday, right?
Okay,
probably. But you know who is in the playoff picture, and what happens if they stay there for another 2 weeks from now? The Arizona Coyotes have the last wild card spot today.
Ooh, that's fun and exciting.
And all I'm trying to get at with that is that at American Thanksgiving, you start to think, and I guarantee you that when we do the show 2 weeks from now, when we're just past it, that's going to be the basis of half of the show.
Oh, yeah.
Who's in the playoff spots at that marker? Because
we will absolutely.
By that point, you know what else you're at? That is the quarter mark.
Yeah, well, right, and that's why I think that's a good little indicator. But
so really quickly before we wrap the show, you wanted to mention this, right?
Yeah, so we do have one more serious story here before we get out of here.
This came out Sunday morning.
Yeah, it was announced on Sunday that former Flyers goaltender Roman Cechmanek has passed away at the age of 52. It was sudden. It doesn't feel like we know a whole lot about it. We do just want to extend our best wishes to his friends and family. Obviously, it's a really tough time. Roman Cechmanek is a crazy story, because he was drafted in the 6th round of the 2000 draft at 29 years old. Came straight into the NHL and was a runner-up for the Vezina Trophy, literally in his first season. He played 3 years in Philadelphia. His save percentages in his 3 years in Philadelphia were .921, .921, and .925. He was ridiculous. Goals against were .201, .205, and a .183 in 2002, 2003. And yes, I know that that's the peak of dead puck era, but a sub-2 goals against average is ridiculous.
Yeah.
And I remember as a kid being devastated when they moved on from Cechmanek, because that was at the height of the Flyers goaltending carousel, right? Like the post-Hextall carousel, where Cechmanek's there, Van Beesbrook's there, Neil Little is a Phantoms goalie who plays some games. There's Brian Boucher makes a couple of trips through Philadelphia. Robert Esch is there. Like the names go on and Taro Nitamaki. The names go on and on and on about Flyers goaltenders from the early 2000s. And from a statistical perspective, not many were better than Cechmanek.
Sure. Well, the draft story that you just mentioned, I it's not exactly the same by age, obviously, but I kind of liken it to another Philadelphia athlete right now. It's kind of like the Jordan Mailata story.
Yes.
Because, like, a guy who you took a flyer on late in a draft, you know, in like a late round or a middle. In that case, I think in that year's draft, it would have been a middle round, because there was like 9 still at that point, right?
Yeah.
Something like that.
Something like that, yeah.
But you take a chance on a guy, and then all of a sudden you realize, wait a minute, like with a little bit of help, he's all pro. You know, he's like an all-star level guy, you know, and he's playing that well. But yeah, like you know, and the interesting part about Cechmanek was it was not like a long-term thing by any stretch. Like, you're right, the goalie carousel was turning big time at that point.
It was real, yeah.
And one of the ironic things is I was having a conversation on Saturday night I was hanging out with with a friend for like the hours leading up to win the game because these 10:30 starts allow for a lot of downtime before they actually start.
It's tough, yeah.
This is a buddy of mine who's a Bruins fan so we were watching the Bruins Canadiens game. We were talking a little bit because one of the things we brought up was because I asked him, "Are you going down to the game when Recchi gets put in the Flyers Hall of Fame because it's against Boston?" And he usually likes to try to go down to the center whenever Boston's in town. And I brought up the alumni game too, and we started kind of pitching back and forth the idea of who would be there or whatever. Because earlier this week, I'll mention this while we're on it too. Because earlier this week they confirmed Mike Richards is going to play in the alumni game.
Yeah, we love to see that,
which is a really cool story, and it clearly shows again it's another guy who hasn't been playing in the NHL, which then makes him an alum of the NHL, so to speak.
Yes.
But hadn't been back to anything like this for a while either. So now he's coming back for this, which is cool.
It'll be nice to see Richie.
And
Absolutely.
And there's a lot of guys who you can start to do because my first thought was okay, listen, they're doing this big celebration for the 74 Cup team, and I believe like the Alumni Association, the Flyers alumni anyway, just put a post out recently that pretty much every surviving member of that team is making it.
That is awesome to hear.
Just about. It's like if it's not all of them, it's close. But obviously they're not going to play in an alumni game. Like most of these guys are retired from that, right?
Of course, right.
So my immediate thought is what's the next biggest thing that happened against the Boston Bruins?
The 2010.
And Mike Richards is part of it. Oh, by the way, I saw something today about how Simone Gagne's got an appearance the day of the Recchi game, of the induction game, which means he'll be in town that weekend. So without confirmation,
he'll definitely be there.
Gagne's playing in the alumni game.
Almost 100%. Yeah.
They haven't said that Briere's playing yet, but I gotta imagine you should.
Jonesy
they have to.
They got to play and be on opposite teams. Come on.
Jonesy doesn't usually, but Scott Hartnell, take the. I turned even said, you know what? The Bruins are going to be in town. Can James Van Riemsdyk come out and stand on the Bruins alumni bench for a second?
He's their honorary coach.
Right, just to be there because, and then you have literally in the building, you have all 4 goal scorers who were in that Game 7 for the Flyers. And oh, by the way, and we're still waiting for, by the way, there was another Bruins name that was added today that I didn't even remember that he was a Bruin, to be honest. It's a little bit before our time. But Al Iafrady's going to play. I
remember. Yeah, okay. We'll obviously talk about those rosters when we get a little bit closer to the All-Star game.
Yeah, we were starting to talk about whatever, and Bush is playing already, but we weren't sure who. There's always a second goalie, right?
Sure.
So we weren't sure who it was going to be, and I actually even said, Esh has played in a couple of these. He might do it. But it was ironic that we're talking the same time frame. When Esh was a goal, because Esh was the goalie Czechmanic split time with when they won Jennings.
Absolutely.
So it's it was just it was ironic timing to wake up and find that out.
They split the Jennings with some guy you might have heard of named Marty Brodeur.
Did you think?
Right. The guy who does the Enterprise commercials? Yeah.
Has he done one of those recently, though? I feel like he has.
It's been a couple years now.
Now he's walking around rubbing elbows with all the execs because he's working for the Devils again.
I know.
They had this big thing with the Stadium Series.
I know. But I don't think Roman Czechmanic ever came back for an alumni game. But I think he would have.
He was over. He was over in Europe for pretty much the rest of his life.
But I think he would have gotten a pretty massive ovation if he had shown up. During that time of that goalie carousel, he was, like I said, kind of the rock, the one really, really good goalie in that time. And even Robert Esch was playing his best hockey when he was splitting with Roman Czechmanic.
One of the things that resonates about stuff like this, because this happened with the Recchi Hall of Fame induction announcement too, and things like that, is when you get things like this and the guy who's on this, the Flyers obviously issued a statement about this.
Of course. Yeah.
And the name who's on the statement, who's giving you the statement, is Keith Jones.
Yeah.
Who played with them both, different ways.
Absolutely.
So when they're honoring somebody and it's Keith Jones's name plastered all over the press releases and they're teammates of his, and look, certainly you don't expect, I'm sure Jonesy in the same way, you don't expect to be writing a remembrance statement for a guy who's 52
a former
years old.
Teammate. Yeah.
Former teammates, maybe in certain cases,
it's fair.
This is a guy who Jonesy was playing 20
late career, right?
It's you're not expecting to write basically an obituary statement for a guy who's 52,
right? And Czechmonic did play most of his career with the Flyers. He spent 49 games with the Kings the year after, but then afterwards he just went back to Europe. So
how about that irony too, that those two teams played each other the night before? You know,
yeah.
Like sometimes it's weird. Small world. The hockey world's a small world.
Yep. He played professionally for well over 600 or 700 games, if I'm doing the math right here. Most of it in Europe. Well over 150 games with the Flyers. He was also, Roman Czechmonic was the backup for Dominik Hasek at the 98 and 2002 Olympics. Probably the pinnacle of his career in terms of representing his country. I don't think he got a ton of time because Dominik Hasek was the best goalie on the planet at that point in time.
I guess he had no time because
right.
I don't even see stats.
Right. But regardless, he did earn that opportunity. You know, for a very long time, there was a real case to be made that he was the second best Czech goalie in the world, and the best was maybe the best goalie in the world. Here's
the best example of that, by the way, because you're right. That was the heyday of Hasek, obviously. So it's like, of course he wasn't. But what that also means is that he was playing in playoff games a lot.
Yes.
So in 2000, when the Flyers, I think, were out of the playoffs well, no, not that year.
I was going to say 2000 was the year they made the run, wasn't it?
99 they were. 99 they were. 99 was first round, but this is 2000, so it would have been later, I guess. Maybe World Championships were also later, but he played in World Championships that year. Okay. 7-1 record with a goals against, a flat 2, and a save percentage of .925.
It's pretty good.
In Worlds, you know, for Czech Republic as well, for Czechia.
That was the year before he played with the Flyers. He was still in...
And that's why, because then
Europe,
that's why he played in Worlds then, and played that much, because he played in Worlds and the Flyers had Boucher at that time. So
in the 2001 playoffs, he had an .891 in 6 games.
I think you were right when you mentioned this earlier. Then that would have been Boucher, and I think Neil Little was the backup that year.
I think so.
That was Little and Van Beesbroek were splitting it at that time. So in 2000,
in the 2001 playoffs, he played 6 games at an .891. In the 2002 playoffs, he only played 1 series, but he had a .936.
That's because that's only because the
that was the Devils, wasn't it?
No, 102.
I'm saying they only. Oh, it was Ottawa. Okay, they only played 4 games, and
they played 5. He didn't play in one of them.
Okay. And then in the following year, his third year in Philadelphia, played in 13 games, had a 214 goals against and a .909 save. You can't take anything away from it.
That was the year that they played the Leafs in the first round.
Yep.
I think it was first round, right? They got 6 wins. So they won a series against the Leafs, and then they lost to, I want to say, not Buffalo, somebody in that range.
It might have been Buffalo.
I'm blanking. I know who won the cup that year. It was the Devils.
Okay. Well, regardless, we do just want to send our condolences to the friends and family of Roman Czechmonic. Obviously, 52 years old. It's far too soon, and we hope that they can find some peace. And he had a hell of a hockey career. Nothing else to be said about that. So,
yeah, definitely sad news to wake up to on a Sunday morning for sure. You know?
Absolutely. And there's really no easy way to get to a transition out of here. But just follow the show on social media at YWT Podcast. We will be back next week for a show, hopefully in much better moods. Sorry to end on such a down note like this, but
we'll see. We'll see about the better mood thing, because it's
we'll see how it goes. Yeah.
We're gonna record that kind of fresh off of a game, so we'll see how the mood feels.
We will see. Like I said, follow the show on social media at YWT Podcast. Kevin is at Kevin_Durso. Find us everywhere you find your podcasts, including sportstalkphilly.com. And we'll be back next week. So
can I get a footnote in on the social drop, by the way?
Yeah, absolutely. Go for it.
I don't know if you've seen. You're not as big of a social media guy.
No, I haven't.
But I am. There's been a little bit more activity on Instagram this season lately.
Okay.
There's been some videos, a couple quick little preview videos I've been doing. This is in association with the station, with 97.3.
Okay.
So we've been doing a little bit more of that type of stuff. Go and support those, please, because
absolutely.
The view counts on them early, because they're like we're doing these jointly, so it's going to the station's account and my account. So they're doing decent at the start, but we would like to set our sights even further, obviously, as we do this with more consistency. I think I've been doing these since the first one I did was either before the Buffalo. I think it was before the Buffalo game, the first Buffalo game.
Okay. Yeah.
That one or it was the second one. I don't remember completely. I was also under the weather for a little while, and my voice was shot for a little, so I kind of skipped out on a few of those for a little.
Well,
but either way, support those. And Instagram's the same handle. So
at Kevin_Durso, check those out. Keep supporting those, and
at 973 ESPN on both as well. If you're looking.
There you go.
Station as well.
Absolutely, there you go. And I think that will do it for us here this week. We go out on, like I said, a little bit of a solemn note, but we'll be bringing the energy next week. So we'll see you.